Perfect. All right, everyone, welcome to our final project showcase here at Flatiron School. I'm really excited to have these lovely gentlemen present to you what they've worked so hard on for the past 15 weeks here. We got some software engineering presentations and a data science presentation as well. So I'm really excited to show everyone that. As we're going, feel free to drop all questions in the chat. I will make sure that they get answered at the end of every presentation. Yeah, so please feel free to just, if you think of something, write it down and we'll be happy to answer it for you. And at the end of each presentation, our lovely panelists will drop their contact information, so you can feel free to reach out to them with more questions or job opportunities, whatever you'd like. So without further ado, we will get started with Jacob Yaw and his project Stratify.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jacob Yaw. I'm a software engineering grad, and this is my final project I created called Stratify. Stratify is basically an e-commerce shopping platform, but sort of more along the context of multiple different vendors or companies selling their products through one platform. I actually had the idea for Stratify through my current job. I work in purchasing, and I work for a wholesale company, and I purchase for other wholesale companies. So this is sort of like the retail or individual user version of that, with a little bit of influence from Amazon as well. So just to get started, when you first pull up the application, you have the ability to log in if you already have an account. If not, you can sign up here by clicking and just enter the information. I'm just going to enter some random info really quick. All right. And once you create an account, you are navigated to your profile page. As you can see, there's a spot where orders would go and also where reviews would be. Since I just created an account, I don't have any of that information yet. I also have the ability to change my username here. I can change my password. And I can also delete my account. I'll get a warning prompt if I try to do that. In the right-hand corner is my cart, which currently has no items, and a running total, which is at 0. If I try to check out right now, I'll get a prompt that says no items in cart. And over on the left-hand side is a menu. If I navigate to the shop component, this is where all of the vendor products are. It's worth noting also that currently vendors and vendor products are both created with seed data. So they're automatically seeded into the app. I'm actually still kind of adding features to this just kind of as I go along since I've graduated, where maybe you would have the ability to create a vendor account as well and have an individual vendor page. So just to show off this functionality a little bit, you can scroll with like this sort of this card style shopping page. If I click on an individual card, I'm navigated to the product detail page where I get a little bit more information about the product. All of the names and the description and the price are all also created with seed data. I can write a review here. I want to write a review really quick. After posting a review, they will appear on the DOM immediately. Any reviews that I've created, I also have the ability to remove here. If I add a product to the cart on the product detail page, it immediately appears in the cart, where I also have the ability to remove it. If I go back to the shop page, I can also just add multiple products here. Currently, you can just have one product at a time. Another feature I want to add is, which I would add to the product table on the back end, would be the quantity, which would basically be the stock level. So you'd be able to increase or decrease the amount of products in the cart versus just adding individual products. As you can see, they all appear right here. After I check out, the products disappear. And if I go to my profile page, I have an order right here. where I have the total at the bottom and all the individual products. I also have all the reviews I've ever created in my reviews panel, where I can also delete them right here. Over on the left-hand side is all current user reviews. They're just in the order that they are created. I also have the ability to click on those and navigate to that specific product as well. Up here, I can filter by vendor. So all the values of the different vendor names are put in here. And it updates the DOM just to fetch products for that specific vendor when I click. And then the product search bar, it actually searches by the name, not by the category. So if I just wanted to search box, everything would show up that has the word box. As you can see, because this is created with seed data, it's actually randomly generated. That some of these names for the coffee, like for instance, it makes a little bit more sense. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Some of them do. Ones that are for like appliances, like box mangle, go to bed matchbox. They're a bit random. So you can get some kind of weird results, but it's just kind of fun to play around with for now. And that's the core functionality of the app.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Jacob. Do we have any questions? No worries if not. And if you have a question later, you totally can add it. In the meantime, do you want to drop your contact info, Jacob, in the chat?
Oh, sure.
Awesome. If at any point anyone wants to, get in contact with Jacob, you totally can.
Looks like Rachel does have a question in the Q&A box here.
Oh, thank you so much for catching that. I didn't even see it. How did you make the rating work?
Okay, so the rating, basically in the products, trying to think now. So it's an empty array with stars, star icons. And according to the individual icon that has been clicked, which is set to 1 through 5, that individual rating will be stored in a variable, which is then placed onto the review after the review has been posted. If you want, I'm not sure if I would show that off now or if maybe later I could just show it. But yeah, that's kind of the basic functionality.
Thank you. And someone also in the chat says they're impressed with the pop functionality and the redirects. So great
Thank you.
job, Jacob. Awesome. Well, we will go ahead and move on to Joshua Gottleib, who is going to talk to us about the rest of his OWL, his data science project. Actually, we have one more question that just got popped in here for you, Jacob. What languages did you use for this project?
Oh, yes, I forgot to mention. So it's created with React. The front end language is React and JavaScript, and I did also implement Redux. The back end is created with Ruby on Rails, so they work in tandem together with each other.
All right, thank you so much for sharing. All right,
Mhm.
We good to go, Joshua? All right, take it away.
All right, let's share my screen. Okay, my name's Joshua Gottleib. I'm a data scientist. I just finished up the Flatiron 15-week data science bootcamp, and this is my final project, the rest of the OWL, and I'm just going to jump right into it. So just to get an idea of where I got my inspiration from, you can get inspiration from basically anything. I was scrolling through my memes as I was deliberating what to do with my final project, and I stumbled upon this meme. How to draw an owl. You simply draw some circles, and then you draw the rest of the owl. It's very silly. You know, you might just get a laugh out of it, but it got me to thinking, could you create really highly detailed sketches or images from really low detail sketches? And I did some searching around. I looked for papers, and two papers that I found were these papers, Pix2Pix and AutoPainter. And they both used neural networks to do what's called image-to-image translation, which is taking one image and trying to transform it into another. That's basically what I wanted to do, so I based my work on those two papers. Once I scraped all my images from the internet, I scraped about 30,000 images. I had to figure out how to create my sketches because most of the images don't come with sketches. And what I wanted to do, what I did to solve this problem was I used something called the difference of Gaussians technique. And basically what happens is you take your original image and you apply a really weak blur to it, and then a really strong blur, and you specify this blur strength and you difference them. And this creates a mask on your image. And this mask itself, it's kind of unnatural looking. It doesn't really help that much until you do the next step, which is called extended difference of Gaussians, which is where you do thresholding. So in that mask, we took all of the dark areas and made them white, and we took all the white areas and made them dark. And what it does is it basically it gives you edge detection on the original image and creates what looks kind of like a sketch. So this is how I got my sketches. As you can see, these are much lower detail than the original image. But in order to get this same threshold value, this threshold basically is indicating how much of the image is black. You have to use different gamma values for each image. So I didn't just apply a single gamma value for all of my different owls. I took each owl and iterated through the gammas in 0.01 increments until I hit this threshold value. And I did a threshold value of 0.03 because I thought it looked kind of about the right detail for each owl. So that was how I got my sketches. The next part was actually building the model. The next challenge was building the model. So I used something called a conditional generative adversarial network. It's abbreviated as a CGAN, and it's basically two different models packed into one. So what you have is you have a generator that takes in the sketch image and it creates a fake image. And you have another model called the discriminator that takes in the real image of the owl and the generated fake image and compares the two. And it tries to figure out which one is the real image and which one's the fake image. The generator's job is to create fake images that fool the discriminator, while the discriminator's job is trying to figure out which images are real and which ones are fake and guess correctly. It's kind of complicated, the exact architecture, but basically it's just a two model architecture instead of one. The difficulty with this is that conditional generative adversarial networks are not standard in TensorFlow. So I had to write some custom model architecture and training loops in TensorFlow 2. But the two papers that I based my work on, Pix2Pix and AutoPainter, were not written in TensorFlow 2. Pix2Pix was in PyTorch, AutoPainter was in TensorFlow 1, and I didn't know how to work in either of those. So I had to learn enough about TensorFlow 1 to sort of decode AutoPainter and recreate it in TensorFlow 2. And fortunately, there was a tutorial for Pix2Pix that kind of bridged the gap between PyTorch and TensorFlow 2. So once I made my model, I threw about 3,000 images into the model and trained the model for 200 epochs. And here are some of the results. So at the bottom row are the ground truth images, these are the actual owl images that we started with. And the sketches are the things that are thrown into the generator. The generator doesn't know anything about this bottom row, it only knows the top row. I have two separate ones, Pix2Pix and AutoPainter, because they have some slight differences. But basically what AutoPainter tries to do is it tries to smooth the image out and remove noise artifacts. So you'll notice that in Pix2Pix, there's a lot of like really bright whites next to really dark darks. It's very high contrast. AutoPainter doesn't have that problem. And also in Pix2Pix, generally speaking, you've got some noise artifacts that show up. Those are mostly absent in the AutoPainter ones. So, I mean, this is pretty neat because what the computer has done is it's taken relatively low detail images and it's gotten actually pretty close to recreating the original image just by training. Like I didn't teach it what an owl was. It just learned by processing images over and over. So the answer is yes, you can create detailed images out of really low detail sketches. But I only trained it on owls. I wanted to see how would it do if I put in a not owl. So here are some images that are not owls that I threw in, and I got some mixed results, but overall it did pretty well. You'll notice with the cat, it did pretty well at recreating from a sort of lower detail cat photo that's like very bright and blown out into something that's a lot closer to the original image. But the interesting thing is it did not add feathers. So what my model is actually doing is it's not adding feathers and trying to recreate owls. It's actually taking really low detail images and it's adding detail, like it's taking really low detail areas and selectively adding sort of noisy detail that recreates the original image. And that's really cool because that means it's more broadly applicable. It doesn't just get stuck making only owls. The middle column were what's called an owl bear. If anyone's played Dungeons and Dragons, this is like a classic monster in Dungeons and Dragons. That one didn't turn out so well, but the third column is a person, and the sketch itself has pretty low detail in the hair areas and very little facial hair, but the model was able to recreate the facial hair and some of the detail in the hair up top. So, you know, I think that's overall pretty cool. Further improvements that I'd like to do is I'd like to do different versions of that difference of Gaussians algorithm that I showed. There's a lot of different versions that create different types of sketches. Some are more cartoonish, some are more realistic. Some are only like two-tone. Instead of having like a gradient from white to black, it's starkly white, starkly black. There are a lot of moving pieces on the model that I didn't really change very much. And also there's a lot of model architecture that can be modified to see if there are different results. And then like finally, the last thing I'd like to do would be to put this online so people could put their own sketches in and get images out of them. Because what I kind of did was almost backwards. I took a real image and created a sketch and tried to get back to the image. Realistically, what this would be used for would be to put an image in and get something out of it that you can then use further on. You know, this would be something that like an artist could use. I don't profess to be an artist, but I think it could be cool it could be a cool tool for somebody to use. That's it. Thank you for listening. And, you know, now's the time for questions.
Such an awesome project, Joshua. Thank you so much for sharing with us. We have a couple questions. What is a noise artifact?
Sure. Okay. So a noise artifact, do you mind if I reshare my screen to show? Okay. So a noise artifact is something, when you look at the owl here, let's look at this one. This owl has a defined body, but it has all these sort of like blurs that are added to it. A noise artifact is simply when it's like trying to recreate something by randomly adding shading to somewhere and it doesn't look realistic. As opposed to like an actual real stroke that looks like something somebody would draw. This is just something that the computer randomly made this pixel dark. It randomly made this pixel dark. And it's called noise because it's kind of based off of like probability where it's like, it's just random. It doesn't have any meaning. It's just something that the computer randomly generated. So a noise artifact is when you have these different errors that basically occur that you're not, that they don't mean anything. They're not something that you're intending to draw. It's not like the computer is intentionally saying, oh, of course the owl extends this way. It just randomly shifted some things and that makes it appear wrong. I hope that made sense.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you for sharing with us. Is there a business use case for this project?
So yes and no. So I did it simply to satisfy my intellectual curiosity. However, similar projects like this and the papers that I inspired these off of are things that people have used to create websites that have been used for artists and AI generation. And, you know, whether or not you consider AI art generation to be, you know, morally correct or not, there is use for being able to create images out of basically nothing. You know, you wanted to give a computer a very quick sketch and have it create a logo for you. This might be able to do that. Hope that answers the question.
Totally. Yeah. So cool. All right. And are there other algorithms in use to do a similar task?
Other algorithms in use to do a similar task. to do image to image translation, yeah, there are a lot of them actually. When I was looking things up, it's wild. I didn't learn any of this when I was taking the course. I had to teach myself for this project, but there's like a whole world you could dive into. You know, when I found my papers, I went, okay, I need to know a little bit more about this. So I went back to another paper and I was like, oh God, there's like 50 more papers that are linked to this. And so it's kind of a rabbit hole. This is actually like a fairly new thing. The papers that I based this off of were from 2017, and I actually found people who had been working on this type of a problem as recently as 2021. So it's something that's kind of always developing. The things that I based out off of were actually some of the first ones that were developed.
So cool. You did a lot of research for this project. And I think the last question I see is, how did you know what models to follow for the success of the project?
So again, I did the research on this. I looked at a bunch of papers and said, okay, which ones are doing things that are similar to what I want to do? And honestly, to figure out which model works best, you kind of have to try them. And the papers that I based it off of, one of them was taking just normal images to other images, and one was actually taking non-colored sketches to cartoon images. And those are a little different than what I wanted to do, but I thought, okay, this is maybe similar enough that maybe it'll work. And so I tried it, I tweaked it a little bit, and it ended up working. I mean, I don't profess to be an expert in neural networks, so you just kind of have to try it and see if it works.
Amazing. Thank you again so much, Joshua, for sharing your project with us. It was truly so awesome. And for everyone who's watching, he did drop his info in the chat for you to reach him in the future. So we will go ahead and move on to Andrew, who is going to tell us about his project, the Stahl freelancing platform.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's good to have a lot of you guys on here today. I remember actually attending a showcase like this when I was starting out, and it was really empowering to see people at the end of their journey. So it's good to see everyone here today. So yeah, my name is Andrew Stahl. I am a full stack developer. I'm also a sales coach for a software company. So I'm involved in software pretty much every day of my career so far. And even before I started this program, I was developing, and I kind of taught myself programming before. And so over the last couple of years, and certainly right after COVID, when everyone was kind of twiddling their thumbs and figuring out how can we spend some of our time, I dove into the world of freelancing. So that was a very interesting time where I was trying to figure out like what skill sets can I really start to sell and monetize. And I did land on some form of automation and development. So that's what I still do today. Is on the side, I work with a lot of different clients, personal, professional clients that are trying to optimize and automate some of their business. And so I'm on different freelancing platforms. And I thought, ever since I started this program, I thought that would be a really, really cool final showcase presentation. So I've basically been planning it for that long since I started. But that's really where I got the motivation to try this out, because I've been in this world of freelancing, and I kind of recognize that, hey, you can be a buyer and a freelancer. So you need to have similar functionality, but you need to be able to see things that are a little bit more pertinent to you. As a buyer, you're trying to get somebody's project or skills. And as a seller, you're obviously trying to sell that out. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Let me make sure this is working. Okay, perfect. So this is my application here. So we have a few different modules that you can toggle between. So if I start over here on the postings page, this is your posting for the skill that you were trying to sell. At the top right of this screen, you can see this little toggle. So if I switch over, you can see it's actually changing the site. The site stays the same in terms of the framework, right? We have postings and some of the other parts of the site. But as a buyer versus a freelancer, you want to be able to say, hey, I'm selling these skills versus I'm buying these skills. And the skills that I'm selling as a freelancer probably going to be different than the skills that I'm trying to pick up as a buyer, right? I don't need to have somebody, if I'm freelancing and I'm an expert in digital marketing, I might want to buy somebody's services for accounting. Right. So if you go in and you can create any of these. So right now I'm looking at my freelancer postings. I can go in and I can create any of these. So let's say, for example, offering legal services. Let me actually zoom in here. Right, something like that. I charge $80 an hour. Perfect. Right. So now that shows up on my freelancer postings. If I switch over to the buyer side, you can see that I don't see the same exact things. I think I put in legal assistance here for demoing purposes, but if I toggle back and forth, I'm seeing the different skill sets that I need. And you'll see that throughout the application as well. And at any point, you can edit or delete any of these offerings if, for example, you don't offer those services anymore, you don't need those services anymore. There's also a search functionality. So this will allow you to see every user that's in the application. So if I start searching for anybody here, start typing in a name, I'm going to start to see all of the users that apply to that. I'll see how many postings they have, what's their specialties. So, hey, if I need somebody who's really good at marketing, this will allow me to filter out for those individuals. And if I want to communicate with them, I actually wind up using this next module here, the conversations. So I wanted to build this as kind of like a WhatsApp or an iMessage. Everyone uses a messaging app pretty much every day of their life in some capacity. And so I wanted to try and recreate that. This was actually one of the things that I was really excited about when I started the project. And even before, when I was thinking about creating this, I wanted to create a messaging application for a while. And so this was my version of that, including that in this project. And so I can, at any point, I can go in, I can create a new conversation with any user that's on the application. If I do just stick with the individuals that I already have communications with, you can see I have some messaging going back and forth between these users. So it should look pretty similar to how you see most messaging apps right now. So let's say, can you tell me a little bit more about your experience? So I'll say, sure, do you have time for a call later today? Send that out. Perfect. Now that message gets sent. Now, if you're logging in under this user's account, you'll start to see that message, but on the opposite side. So you're always going to see your sender messages over here. And if I go to a user where I have a bunch of different messages, you can see that there's scrolling functionality, but it'll always bring you back to the bottom. So that essentially saves some time for the user. I did also build this into the application to be dynamic. So if I wanted to create a chat with multiple users, perhaps there's a few different people that I'm trying to create a project with, you could do that. Not always as common with freelancing. More often than not, you're working with one individual, either one client at a time, or you're working with one freelancer at a time. But I know a lot of times with messaging apps nowadays, you can include multiple people in there at once. So I thought that would be a cool opportunity. As you get into the project, so this is actually how you can create a project. If you're working with somebody, an individual that's on the site, this will allow you to keep track of those things. So this is also another area of the system that changes depending on if you're looking at it from a buyer versus a freelancer. As a freelancer, this is a project I'm working on with a buyer. I'm selling my services. I'm saying it's due at this date. This is the price that we agreed upon. Send that out. And as a buyer, I'm kind of doing the opposite. I can keep track of those projects, but I'm buying a certain service from somebody, and it's based on the posting that I created. So if I go back to the freelancer side and I say, all right, let me create a project here, I can only pick the postings that I've posted for. So, hey, as a freelancer, I'm selling my services for digital marketing and for IT services. I can't see every category that's out here because I don't have all those skills. So you need to create a posting first. That's going to be determined on, these projects are going to be determined on those. So if I select digital marketing, let me head over to somebody, let's say 150, and let's say this is due, let's say on the 6th here, right? Click on submit. Perfect. So that now shows up over here. Anything that's been completed already will show in gray. So it'll give you a little bit more of a visual cue of what's still active versus what you've completed. And if I toggle over to the profile page here, much like you saw a little bit earlier, you'll be able to change your password. You can delete your account, just do some things on the profile side. But overall, that was the main pieces of the project. The technologies that I used, so the front end was React and JavaScript. The back end was Ruby on Rails. And I did create most of the formatting that you saw was through Bootstrap, which is a really cool framework that you can use. Doesn't have to be with JavaScript, but there's a lot of frameworks that allow JavaScript and Bootstrap to play really well together. So it can help you streamline a lot of your formatting. I actually stumbled upon Bootstrap. I knew about it, but I didn't really work on it in the project. Stumbled upon Bootstrap about halfway through me finishing this project, and it wound up doubling the amount of time it took me to finish because I had to kind of go back and redo some work, which was all good for the name of learning and development. So I learned a lot throughout trying to streamline those pieces, but that also helps clean up the formatting a lot. So you can see how most of the site is very straightforward, very simple, but kind of has a little bit more of an elegant look to it, which is what I was looking to accomplish. And a couple of the problems that I ran into, that Bootstrap thing was one of them. It wasn't really a problem, but it extended my timeline dramatically in finishing it up. But I did learn a lot through it. The other one was the communications page that you saw. I had a specific idea of what I wanted that to look like. And again, it kind of mirrors off of what you would see in iMessage or WhatsApp or another chat messaging system. But I just couldn't get that formatting to work. I think I had a good idea of like how I wanted to structure the back end. That was actually a little bit easier to work with, but just formatting that took probably 10 to 11 hours just by itself, because I kept running into these weird walls where I'm like, it really shouldn't look like this, but I wound up finding my way around those. So that's kind of the highlights there. I'll include my contact information down below. So I'll have my number and email if you guys want to reach out, LinkedIn if you want to connect, and GitHub for all of the code that I used for this project and my previous projects.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Andrew. It was awesome. I am not a software engineer, but I heard from several software engineers on campus that the chat thing that you did was really, really cool and super impressive. So great job. We have got a question. How complicated is your backend Ruby on Rails model?
So I had to build in some complexities based off of the requirements of the final project. I won't get into the details too much, but I essentially had to structure some of my models a certain way on Ruby on Rails that I technically didn't really need to, but because I had to adhere to some of the requirements of the project, I did that. But I did have a lot of different models associated with it. Let me actually pull something up here real quick. Freelancer app walkthrough, database. Okay. Let me share my screen here one more time so you guys can actually see. This is included on the desktop 1, 2. This is included on my GitHub page in the media. And also, if you go to that main GitHub page, it'll show you this snippet in the README. But this is essentially how my backend looks. So I had a few different models that were handling whether you were a freelancer or a buyer, and also tying that in with like just a user account, because one user is essentially both a freelancer and a buyer. Then you have the postings, conversations, messaging, and projects. So kind of all the tabs that you saw in the presentation, I had that as part of my models. And then when it got into the conversations and messages, I kind of had to split those out to be a little bit more dynamic. I don't really expect anyone to see that at one glance and be able to absorb all of it, because it took me a while to kind of get to that point. So if you guys have any specific questions on those or how to structure some of those pieces, I'm more than happy to talk offline about those as well. But yeah, a decent amount of complexity there. I think I had like 7 or 8 models.
Amazing. Do we have any other questions for Andrew? Or any of our panelists, if you'd like. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed these lovely presentations. They worked super hard on them, and I think it's obvious that it was well worth it. These were just some amazing projects. We're so grateful you were able to come share with us. I did drop in the chat. If you are interested in booking a call with our admissions team, feel free to click that link. They're happy to talk with you. I also dropped our Flatiron School Instagram, so you can kind of keep up to date with what we're doing, what we're hanging up with. All right. I will hang back if anyone has any questions, but other than that, y'all have a great night. Thank you for joining us.
See you guys.
Bye, Andrew. Thanks.
Thanks for having me on here. Have a good night, everyone.
It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Have a good night, guys.
Bye, Jacob.